This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by OWC, Spectra 1964, Atom Audio, Samply, Isotope, and API. You're hearing my voice right now on the API 3122V mic pre and Spectra 1964 C610 complimenter through Isotope, RX, Ozone, and Neutron, all recorded safely onto an OWC SSD and mixed on Atom Audio monitors. So get ready to rock.
Call it my floor mic technique, and it's essentially two microphones on cardioid pointing down at the floor about 3 foot in front of the drums. It's quite boomy sounding, just thumpy and a bit horrible. When you really compress that, it gives it like a grit, and when you mix that into a drum kit, it makes it sound more real and live. So when I'm working with these sort of program drums, I'm trying to create sounds like that.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. Atom Audio introduces the all-new A7V monitor with rotatable HPS waveguide for the accelerated ribbon tweeter and advanced onboard DSP-based room correction using the included A-Control software or optional SonarWorks software and measurement mic, allowing you to tune your speakers for your room, your mix position, and your ears anytime you want. Get the extended 5-year warranty for monitors that will improve as your studio improves at atomaudio.com. If you're ready to upgrade your studio to the famous sound of API's large format consoles, then you're ready for the Box, a small format console featuring the same analog circuitry and original 2520 op-amp design that made API famous for more than 50 years. Record through 8 world-class mic pre-channels, mix through 24 smooth as glass faders, and upgrade your home studio to legendary status. API now offers a virtual console experience, allowing you to get a personalized online demo of the Box at apiaudio.com. Howdy, Rockstars. It's your host, Lid Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Clint Murphy, a multi-platinum award-winning producer, engineer, mixer, songwriter, and musician. He's worked on records as diverse as Manic Street Preachers, Enter Shikari, RØMANS, and 50 Cent, racking up hits both in the UK and internationally. Clint has been a guest on the podcast previously on episode 313, where you should go back and check it out if you would like to hear his backstory of producing power pop rock tracks in the UK and elsewhere. But now he's actually back in New Zealand. And today we're joining him again to talk about new projects and producing and mixing, in person and remotely, and setting up a new studio, I think, and all kinds of good stuff. So a shout out and a thank you again to our mutual friend, Ryan Smith over at Sterling Sound for making our original introduction. Please welcome back Clint Murphy to Recording Studio Rockstars. Clint, are you ready to rock again, dude?
Oh yeah, Lidge, I am very much ready to rock. Thank you for having me on.
It's my pleasure, man. Nice to see you again. I mean, I remember last time we did an episode, it seemed to be very well received too. So it's good to have you back on the show, man.
Thank you.
What's the latest with you? I think you just did some moving about, right?
Yeah, well, I've actually, after 13 years of living in the UK, I've immigrated back to my original home country of New Zealand. So I've really only just got here just at Christmas and just moved into my new place, and we'll be starting to build my new recording studio as of this Tuesday. So it's all happening.
That's pretty exciting. Of course, we do our interviews in advance, so the timing might be different, but what's the weather like down there at different times of the year? If you're in New Zealand around Christmas, is it pretty cold and snowy, or is it? No, it's the opposite, right? It's a sort of summertime at that point.
Yeah, I mean, it's right in the middle of summer. And I mean, I feel so blessed where I am. I've moved to a location that's right on the beach. So in between mixing and recording. I can just drop tools or drop compressors, let's say, and go for a surf. It's going to be the perfect lifestyle.
Oh, that's awesome, man. I tried surfing once in Montauk at my brother's place, and I could never really get up on the board. I just kind of splashed around. But for the next 3 days, I couldn't go to sleep because all I could see were waves coming at me.
Yeah, man. It's like a bug. It's like recording. It's, you just can't stop thinking about what bit of gear you need. It's like what surfboard you're going to have and what wave you're going to catch. So yeah, I'm getting on in my age a little bit now, not too much, but I started surfing when I was quite young, about 10 years old. So I'm trying to get my paddle fitness back up.
Yeah. I don't remember if we talked about surfing last time. I'm guessing maybe we didn't if you were back in the UK then.
Not a lot of surfing going on there.
Not a lot of surfing going on there, no. But I do have one surf meets the studio analogy. I am, a wannabe drummer, and one of the challenges for me is when the drum fill, actually, I don't even need a drum fill anymore. I'll literally just play, and then sometimes the stick just goes flying out of my hand because I'm a space cadet. And so I thought, surely there's got to be a way to hold onto your sticks a little bit better, like some kind of Gorilla Glue thing for sticks. And I ended up ordering something that's basically like, how surfing is introduced us to the world of sex wax?
Yes, yeah.
So I found it's the same stuff for drumsticks. You just sort of
really?
wax down your drumstick and then you get a good grip on it.
Oh, that's great. Maybe I should just come in straight from the surf in my wetsuit and just rub my handle over the board and start drumming. I don't know, maybe.
Exactly.
That's a good tip.
Yeah. So there you go, rock stars. I don't really know why they call it sex wax. I think it's just because we all think surfing is cool and they just ran with it.
I think so.
Well, groovy. So what is new as far as your studio? You're in the midst of setting it up. Maybe just kind of tell us what are you thinking about as you set up a new studio? Because lots of us are at different times.
Yeah, well, my container has just arrived with all my gear, so I'm really excited about getting that in. I have a lovely new sort of workstation, which is it's a session desk, which is it's a lovely, bit of equipment to put everything in. But the main thing that I'm really, really excited about is I'm going full Dolby Atmos, and I haven't done any official mixes yet. I've just been tinkering around, but I've got all the speakers for my 11.1.4 setup, and I'm just so excited about getting into this new adventure, really, of mixing in Atmos.
That's really wild, man. We've been getting some great Atmos interviews on the show, so that'll be cool to talk to you about that. 11.1.4 sounds like a lot of speakers. Where did those go, and what does that mean?
Okay, I'm sorry. It's very early, and I've just woken up. I'm talking about 7.1.4, so 11 speakers in total. So
right.
Yeah, so just your typical, 3 in the front, 2 at the sides, 2 at the back, and 4 in the roof, and then 1 sub. It's
cool.
going to be my setup, and it's going to be with the same my same stereo setup. I've got Genelec 8050, so I'm running 8050s all around, and some 8040s up top. And I'm going to be using a Pro Tools MTRX, for the control. I'm going to have 2 separate systems. So I'm going to keep my normal stereo system, which is using my Apogee converters. And then when I do the Atmos stuff, I will switch to the MTRX is the plan.
And then what I feel like I've seen pictures of you working on Genelec speakers, but I forgot what you said your main monitors are for your studio. Do you have like a pair of monitors for stereo and then something different that you're going to do for Atmos, or will you use the same stereo monitors, whether you're stereo or whether you're doing Atmos?
I was unsure about that. I mean, I am using my Genelec 8050s for my stereo, and I've gone and seen a few people, and there's a mixer called Chris Sheldon, who I've gone to his place, and he's essentially got a very similar setup, and he's got 2 discrete systems, and I'm actually going to try just using my left and right normal Genelec speakers as my stereo, and also trying to use that same system for the Atmos as well. So instead of having 5 speakers across the front wall, it'll just be the 3. I think the problem I'm going to find a little bit tricky is that with the Atmos setup, the speakers will be a bit further away from where I'm normally sitting in the stereo field. So if I can feel that feels normal for me being further away, I'll just keep those stereo and Atmos speakers the same. But if not, I might have to get another set of speakers. It's all getting very expensive, isn't it, with these speakers?
Well, yeah, plus the time you're taking just to chat with us about it. So let's see. So if I heard you right, when you set up the Atmos, you think that the left and right might be out a little further, which makes you have to sit back more. Is that the way you just said it?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Like from the rooms I've been in, the left and right speakers, on the front wall are further back than what you would normally have if you were, mixing with near field. So I think that might get a little bit of getting used to. I mean, it all depends. When I set up my room, you never really know when you set up a room. You can do so many calculations and room acoustics, but until you get those speakers in there and play them, you're not going to know how it really sounds, do you? So,
right.
It'll just be a little bit of trial. One of the difficulties I have here in New Zealand is it's quite far away from everything. So getting equipment in, and I've been speaking to the Dolby guys in the UK, and they've been really great, with helping me getting set up. But there's officially nobody in New Zealand at the moment doing Atmos mixing for music.
Wow.
So that's cool. That's will be fun. And but to get my room, approved, I'm not quite 100% sure how I'm going to do that at the moment. They might have to fly someone over. They might be able to do it remote. But what's really cool is when I went to Dolby in the UK, what they really, really want is they just want people to start mixing in Atmos, and they just want professionals doing it. They just want content out there. So they're really excited to get people who know how to mix currently and are good at mixing currently, just to get on the boat and on the wagon, and if that's what you say, to just start doing it. So I haven't got lots of experience, but for me, it feels like a new adventure. And I don't know, I've got really, really excited about, mixing again. Not that I wasn't excited before, but I just feel like this is going to be good fun,
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's sort of how I feel now, just having finally a really good monitoring setup in stereo. So I can completely, empathize with that. It's like when you get something new and exciting going in your studio, it just rekindles all the excitement of wanting to create again. Now, speaking of which, one of the things that I keep thinking with regards to Atmos is I can't wait till we get past the chapter of remixing old catalogs of music where everybody talks about comparing, the stereo mix to the Atmos mix and everything. Because there's a part of me that just goes, well, who cares? It's like, well, I'm looking forward to seeing what happens when people start creating in that world. And so have you thought about that? Do you see yourself doing some really interesting and new things at the production process?
I do actually. First of all, I think you've hit the nail on the head. A lot of people sort of say, oh, there's loads of work out there for all the back catalog and stuff. That doesn't really interest me that much. I mean, yes, it's nice to get paid or whatever, but it was actually Andrew Sheps, who you've had on your show, haven't you? I think you've had him on your show before. So yeah, he's been lovely about helping me, with any questions I have. And he was sort of saying with the back catalog stuff, I mean, you really need to be mixing about 3 tracks a day to make it worthwhile, and it's a bit more like a machine in and out. And I don't know, just comparing stereo mixes to Atmos mixes is not really what floats my boat. What I'm really looking forward to is doing my own productions, or, like basically where you can kind of do two separate mixes. You got your stereo, great, people listen to it and that. And then for me, the idea is you listen in Atmos, and that's a separate sort of thing, whether it be, binaurally, or whether you have a big setup, at your house or in your studio. I think, just to get creative down that road. So it's just not like a fold down of the same old stereo mix. So I'm thinking about even maybe when I'm tracking, about putting up different, room mics on drums, to think about, how I might better place those in the room. And I think even when I'm starting to mix now in stereo, I'm thinking, oh man, that'll be great if I could just put that out that speaker, or I could do that with this. And, so I think it's a bit foreign, and it's a bit like the Wild West at the moment. No one really knows. I think people are still figuring it out. So when people went from mono to stereo a little bit, I believe, I think people are still trying to figure out what the norm is. But that's the great thing about getting on it early, is that I don't think there is a norm, and it's okay to make mistakes at this point. And I'm sure the next couple of years will be a lot of learning for all of us with this, until the format's really, out there a lot more than just the binaural as well.
Yeah, well, I think about, sort of a funny idea of how when it went from mono to stereo, then people had to get used to stereo. And remember, like, early stereo was just like, ooh, we're going to do like a wild thing and send stuff to different speakers. And, then records would be put out, and they'd make there'd be a paragraph about how it was a stereophonic record and everything like that. And you can hear this instrument in the left speaker and this one in the right speaker. So, I'm sure there will be an element of that with the introduction of Atmos too. But what's funny is to think about how once we all got comfortable with stereo, or, in my case, I just grew up with that. I'm not that old, but it's like, then one of the things I do is I go check my mix back in mono.
So you still check your mix back in mono? Or?
I do. I don't know. I don't remember if I asked you about that last time, but whether it's the right thing to do or just another way to stand back and squint at your creation and go like, what do I think? But what's funny to me is like, right now it's like taking these stereo mixes and people are remixing an Atmos and trying to, compete with an original mix that everybody loved. And that, forget that idea. That's just a challenge that must be really, really difficult to have to do. But when you create an Atmos and you start out, I wonder how often you'll be checking it in stereo in the same way that you would check in mono. Who's going to check their Atmos mix in mono? That's what I want to know.
I think that's the thing that stresses me out a little bit, is when you do go back and check your, stereo mix against your, Atmos mix. It's because there's obviously there are ways to do it, but with your mix EQ and your mix compression, mainly your mix compression, it's, and limiting and all this kind of stuff, there's just no comparison. There's no way to really sort of, copy those things that were on your mix bus really without setting up huge bus groups and everything like that. So I think it's, that's why I think the whole idea of the Atmos is that it's it's a different format. It's not the same, people should sort of listen to it knowing that it's going to be different, and I've heard some really bad Atmos mixes, but that's,
I've heard maybe some bad stereo mixes.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I'm sure there's going to be lots of bad Atmos mixes coming from my room as well for a little bit, but who knows?
We won't hear those ones.
We won't hear those ones. Yeah, but it's really hard to actually compare your Atmos mixes with, there's no real way to reference really. I mean, there is, but, you could, at the moment with stereo, you can just go online and check someone else's stereo mix, but it's very difficult to just compare your Atmos mix to somebody else's. So the only way to do it is to really, what I'm encouraging us to do is, as, producers, is to share ADM files, which are the, obviously the master files, to each other, so we can just sort of open them up and listen and see what other people are doing. And as we sort of share these together, I mean, you obviously got to be a little bit careful with labels and everything, but I mean, I've got friends that I, send my stereo mixes to check and listen, and other producers. And so my plan is to do that with Atmos as well, just so you can compare, how we might be progressing together and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we get together with people whose ears we trust all the time, and like, come listen to my mix. What do you think? Go listen to theirs. I think that's a key important part of it. Ever wonder how I get a consistent sound quality mixing hundreds of episodes of Recording Studio Rockstars? It's because I've been cheating by using Isotope, RX, Ozone, and Neutron on every single episode. Right now, you are hearing RX breath control, declick, declip, DS, deplosive, voice denoise, ozone multiband compression, neutron EQ, and limiting, all from iZotope. Try out the subscription option for yourself with an extended 30-day free trial at iZotope.com/rockstars or use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off any individual plugin purchase. In my studio, I chose the OWC Mini Stack STX Thunderbolt 4 certified storage and expansion hub because it seamlessly connects to my Mac Mini M1 for my dedicated audio drives, sample libraries, and backup drives. It's the perfect size to stack with the Mac Mini and add storage and connectivity over Thunderbolt or USB. Whether you have the new or older Mac Mini, nothing stacks up in your studio quite like OWC. Find the new Mini Stack STX in all your storage needs at macsales.com/rockstars. Another funny thought that comes to mind about back checking, like now we have 11 speakers in the room, and do we check that against stereo or, jokingly mono, although maybe not so jokingly. But you know how you learn that there's a point, and then there's 2 dimensions, and then there's 3 dimensions, and then people talk about the 4th dimension, and then you'll see some model somewhere that says, well, we can't show you the 4th dimension, but we can show you what a shadow of the 4th dimension looks like in 3 dimensions. So I'm like, what is Atmos a shadow of? I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, so that's fascinating, the idea of setting up a session and then actually intentionally positioning mics on instruments where each mic is meant to go to a different speaker. That's really exciting. I bet it's going to be a lot of fun to just try that and see what happens.
Yeah, it might not particularly work, but just think about a drum kit, for example. It would be weird for it to sort of, it's going to be weird to put those mics up and then put them in the back speakers and everything. It wouldn't sound, like.
But would it though? Like if the drums were bouncing off the wall behind you and you could somehow reproduce that sound of the wall right there.
Yeah, I think, you could definitely do it, but would it sound, does it sound good? That's the thing, because we have some ideas of what we do in stereo, as far as putting up mics. And then when you put, if you just put up room mics to sound like a drum kit in a room, it doesn't actually sound that, well, it sounds good, but it doesn't work within the music, does it? Right. So, but I have some ideas where it's like, if you're recording, why not just chuck up a couple of extra mics and see whether it works in, the ceiling, a little bit in the ceiling or on the back or whatever it may be. It might just expand the drum kit out more, for example, or it could be room mics on some acoustic guitars it's all just, like I say, it's the Wild West. Anything goes at the moment, I think, with this format.
So of course, what we're describing now is, what ways microphones and acoustic instruments can replicate an acoustic environment in Atmos. But that, again, is just one aspect of what's possible. There's no rule about what we're supposed to be hearing all around us. There's just, reproducing an acoustic environment is one possibility, but another is like some badass guitar pedal that's sending your guitar effects to a whole multitude of speakers around you, and it becomes this whole creative expression. That's pretty exciting stuff.
Yeah, that stuff's really cool. What I quite like is, just having places where you can just place things, and it doesn't need to be with an acoustic environment, like you say. Just having in the chorus some of the elements coming up out the sides, or like some of the things that work really well sort of behind you and stuff are like the obviously reverbs, but strings, like orchestral stuff and synths and some of those things, which I think are really cool and really interesting. And as far as like what I call the front wall part, which is, basically your left, center, right, the stuff that traditionally works quite well kind of stays there, really, like your drums and your bass and lead vocals and electric guitars and things like that. But some of those sort of additional production elements and programming stuff is pretty cool to have, around you and immersed in as well. It's quite cool.
Yeah, the vocals, for example, I could easily see it making sense to our brains to have, a lead singer in front of us, but then have other voices around us, like, or a chorus of voices where different line. I think of like Queen, Bohemian
Oh, yeah.
Rhapsody or something.
Yeah.
And you could just picture all these voices coming at you from different corners. Has that one already been done in Atmos and I just haven't gone and listened to it yet? I don't know.
Oh, I'm not too sure. I don't know if I've heard that. I mean, some of the best Atmos mixes that I've heard aren't the most famous ones. They're like, like, for example, Miles Clark, who's actually the Dolby guy in the UK who works for Dolby, and some of his mixes that he's done are amazing. Just the way he's sort of placed things or done things, because there's always the classic Rocket Man, Elton John, and all these sort of things. But they're great to sort of show off what it does. But when people start getting really expressive with it and doing, what I find really moving is some of the more acoustic based stuff, which is like, piano, acoustic guitar, like lovely vocals, strings, that kind of thing. Because you can seem to do really nice things with the atmosphere of that. Whereas when it comes to like traditional rock music, it's a little bit hard to sort of move those electric guitars from that front wall and do, anything too crazy. Otherwise it just starts sounding a bit weird,
Right. Because we're familiar with what a band looks like and where those instruments are supposed to be. What about the binaural aspect of it? What sort of things have you learned about it? What have you, what do you feel like you've already discovered, or where do you feel like you just don't even know yet?
Well, that's kind of how I started. I was very interested in the idea, and I didn't have a setup to do it. So when I spoke to Andrew Sheps, who sort of helped me get into it, he just was sort of said, just start on headphones, do it. Because I said, do you think I'm crazy, like going down this road without even having the studio? And he's like, no, man, just go for it. So I just did that, and you can download the renderer for free. I think also, I'm using Pro Tools, but I think it comes in Logic as well. I mean, it's probably all going to change by the time this podcast comes out. But
right.
what I found was when I was doing the headphone things binaurally, it was fun and it was great. You could hear things going on, but you couldn't quite judge exactly what was going on. And then I took that mix and actually listened to it in an actual, setup with the 7.1.4. And I kind of, I pretty much cringe. I was like, oh my gosh, why did I put those things way back there? Why did I do this? So I think you really do need to have the speaker setup to start with, and then you need to check it on headphones to fold down, see how it folds down, all these sort of things. But I think the binaural thing, it will over time get better and better and better. Like it happens. When you listen binaurally or on any format, it folds down. At the time, I've lost the word.
In real time or something.
Yeah, in real time. So, and the binaural thing will get better and better, and it has been getting better already. You know what I mean? So, and that's the really exciting thing about it for me. The difference between, say, 5.1 and this format Atmos is that it does fold down to so many different formats, and everyone's got a set of headphones, and everyone can give it a go. And so it means that I think the format is going to stay. It's here to last, which is
cool.
Which is really cool. You don't have to have a living room with a 5.1 speaker set up and have to sit right in the center. You can listen to it on so many different formats, and there are going to be different products coming out, sound bars, and it's going to be way more accessible than 5.1 ever was.
Yeah, and I guess with people having a variety of different surround speaker setups and or headphones, if the technology, in this case Atmos, and being able to mix like that, if it evolves and upgrades and updates and everything, ultimately it's still able to do the same thing, hopefully, which is hit all of those formats at once instead of having to be I can't even say the word. Instead of having to be exclusively this format, stereo, or a surround mix, or a binaural mix.
Yeah.
So it's cool that it opens up possibilities. I still need to do it. I'm excited to check it out too.
Give it a go. Just, like I say, it's free to download. I sound like a rep now, don't I?
But go for it.
anything to get excited about music and stuff. If you're looking for a new challenge, just give it a go, try it out.
So let's break a little bit of this down. So to the best of your ability, what is binaural for the rock stars who are wondering what we're talking about?
So, other people can probably explain this better than me, but essentially with your headphones, when you're mixing in Atmos, you have the ability to say whatever that object is. Now, this is the confusing thing it's called object-based mixing.
Right.
So let's just make it really simple. An object would be like an instrument. So say, for example, it could be a vocal. So you place the vocal not between, the left and right speakers, but you place it within the room somewhere, okay? And that object can move around. Now, any object, you can say whether you want it to be have the space of like no space or near, mid, or far. So essentially putting on some reverb and some, basically some characteristic to make it feel like it's in a room somewhere. So any single instrument, like a vocal, you could have really near, so it feels like it's close to you. Or you could have like backing vocals set to far, so they feel like they're further away from you. So basically with all these sort of elements of near, mid, and far on, when you have the headphones on, it should feel like you're actually in that room and you can hear things in front of you, behind you, etc. So that's probably the simplest way of explaining it.
Right. So with stereo and a pair of headphones on, we can pan it from the left ear to the right ear. And if it's in the middle, it kind of sounds like it's in the middle of our head. I guess that's a way to explain it, right? But with the binaural, it digitally recreates the three-dimensionality of hearing something actually around our head. So you can hear it on the left, on the right, or in front of you. Theoretically, you can hear it above you and maybe even below you, but and behind you. Those ones tend to not. That's where it tends to fall apart a little bit.
Yeah, it does a little bit. I mean, how it effectively works is say you've got someone standing in front of you singing directly at you, a meter in front of you. Your ears hear that source coming at you at the same time, and it has high frequency content because your face is pointing directly at them.
Yeah, they better be a paying client too, a meter in front of me.
Yeah, I would have my fingers in my ears. But then if they walk behind you and go behind you, it's going to be the same hearing at equal distance left and right. It hits your ears at the same time, but it's going to have less high frequency and mid-range content. So your brain knows that person's behind you, that's sort of, what happens when you're in a room. Now, with the whole binaural thing, what they do is they add those sort of that frequency spectrum and time, into oral time difference and some of these things into that binaural, those settings. So you can kind of feel like it's behind you. Just like if they want to make it sound like it's above you, if something's above you, there's generally less low end and stuff in the source. So they take out some of those things. So that's how it's very clever how it works. So this algorithm is getting better and better and better all the time. So something that sounds good in binaural now, in 5 years' time, the algorithms might be so much better and will actually your mixes will sound better and better without you having to do anything.
Oh, interesting. So like you did the mix and the speakers to get it right, but in the future, the binaural renderer will do a better job of converting it to a pair of headphones.
Exactly.
That's cool. And so another element of, the three-dimensionality of sound is rock stars, our ears have, the funny ear, right? Our ear, the ear, right, is the pinea is what it's called, I guess. I don't know if that's the whole thing or parts of it, but our funny shape of our ear, part of the reason why it's shaped uniquely the way it is our brain, like the sound travels across the shape of our ear as well and gives us more location cues.
That's right. They essentially point forward. Yeah, exactly. The phasing, the timing, all that stuff.
Yeah. And and so our brain learns, how to correlate something that is actually behind us to what it sounds like coming into our ears. But of course we all have different shaped ears and we're a little bit different. So I guess with the binaural rendering algorithms, the best they can do initially is to take kind of an average of what everybody's ears are like. So, and the things that you were just describing, Clint, and kind of give you a best estimate of what that sound would sound like. But I think in the future, you're going to be able to, scan what your ear looks like. And that's going to that's going to get worked into the algorithm so that it, comes very, very close to replicating a digital model of it. It might be cool. Might be weird as hell, but it might also be really cool.
It's being like being colorblind, and then someone giving you what color looks like. You know what I mean? Yeah. That would be. I'm slightly colorblind, and I've always wondered that'd be amazing to have some glasses that you could put on and go, "Oh my gosh, this is what everyone sees."
Yeah. I'll give a shout out to one of our previous guests too. So on episode 236, Andres Mayo, he talked a lot about doing strictly binaural recording, and they would do things like take a binaural head and actually do physical mixing of sounds around it and re-record it and stuff. And it was some of the most remarkable binaural recordings I've heard too. So that might be a fun thing for Clint, for you to check out, and also Rockstars if you're curious about some of that stuff. It's not Atmos, but it's related topic because it does give a good demonstration of what's possible with binaural.
Yeah. I mean, just if you go and learn a little bit about how the ears and work and all that kind of stuff, it actually does help with this, even stereo mixing. I think. I don't know what you think, Lich, but
I think so too. I love learning all the science behind the ear and how we hear, because it helps you understand. Just the ideas that like when you add more high end to a sound, it naturally makes it feel like it's closer to us, because that's what we would hear if somebody was close, like you just described.
Yeah, and the way you might use different reverbs, not just let's put on a fancy plate reverb, but if you want an acoustic guitar to sort of sit back, have depth and sit further back in the mix, you can obviously put on like a small room reverb, or like you said, take some of the high frequency or presence content out of it to push it back.
Yeah, I think one of the first things I remember learning about that, well, I do remember learning, about the idea of just adding. Not thinking of reverb as a big washy plate, but thinking of it as like, a short little space, and then I remember going and doing a mix, and I was like, wow, this is so much fun. I'm like putting this instrument right back there and doing all this. And, I can't remember if I actually ended up with a good mix by the time I was done, but it was a lot of fun to explore it. But another thing I remember learning to do early on was just this idea of taking a percussion element like a tambourine or a shaker, and putting a really short single slap echo on it. Cool. And that was like a really effective way to just make it sit back a little bit in the mix.
Yeah.
Instead of feeling like it was sticking out front.
Yeah. That's cool. It's going down that road. Something I always do and try and get other producers to do when they send me stuff to mix is I love room mics on percussion. So if you're recording room mics, if you're recording, say, let's say a tambourine, have a close mic, and then and if you've got a nice room, like a space pair, sounds really, really good. Rather than just putting a reverb on, I think it's a really great way to get percussion into a mix, and then you can adjust how much of that room sound, that natural room sound you want. I mean, it's hardly a new discovery, but you might not think when you're recording percussion to record your room mics, but it's much easier to mix things like bongos and tambourines and shakers and all sorts of things, where if you've got a little bit of natural room, it makes so much difference compared to putting on a nice reverb.
All right, man. Bongos, tambourine, shakers. What's your favorite? What's your favorite?
Well, for the room, you mean, or just
which is your favorite percussion instrument?
I think I love a tambourine, but actually I'm mixing a record at the moment which is a bit of a 70s vibe, and there's loads of bongos, which usually I cringe, but I'm loving it, man. I'm just like cranking those bad boys.
I love bongos. I just put bongos on the intro to one of the tracks on a funk record that I did, and it's cool. It's just so much fun to hear it at the beginning. But one of the challenges when you play bongos is like, how do you play them? It's like sometimes it sounds best to hit them with a pencil. Sometimes it sounds best to just use one finger right on the edge. And what does this one? So loads of bongos. So is it like a bongo groove, or is it more like little accents, like like Hawaii 5/0 kind of stuff.
Yeah, with lots of reverb on.
Yeah, that's my favorite.
Cool.
The Spectra 1964 C610 complementer brings fast, clean, quiet compression and limiting to your recordings and mixes. The C610 includes the famous Spectra 101 amplifier used in legendary studios like Stax, Ardent, and Record Plant. I love my C610s for drums, vocals, guitars, and especially bass, which helps me get the perfect low end in my mixes. And you can make your mixes rock at Spectra1964.com. When your band hits the studio, it's smart to have all the songs, mixes, and notes in one place. But figuring out how to share all the files can be frustrating. There's always somebody in the band who can't seem to log in or wants to use a different platform. Samply.app makes it easy to collaborate and communicate by creating a shared project so the whole band can get organized before the session. Just upload a voice memo, lyric sheet, song charts, photo, video, mixes, masters, or even invoices and start commenting. Sign up for your free account now with 25 gigs of storage and unlimited projects, and use the coupon code RSR20 to get 20% off the first 3 months when you're ready to upgrade at samply.app. All right, so let's see. Let's talk about your speakers. So you're putting in your Atmos system. What did you decide, or what have you learned about, the speakers that you chose? And without going too deep into the weeds, does this have to be a very expensive process for us to explore, or are there affordable ways to set up an Atmos system as far as you've discovered?
Well, it depends who you speak to. And I spoke to some people. I mean, the best thing to do is just speak to loads of people like I did, get some knowledge and figure out what's best for you. Now, some people like, Andrew Sheps was great. He was just like, just do it. It doesn't have to be expensive. It can be expensive, and it probably will get expensive, but just start out with anything really. So, and then I spoke to some people that were like, no, you can't use those speakers. You can't use this. You can't use that. You got to do this. And, sort of freaked me out a bit. But I come to the conclusion that you need some speakers that fit within that room. They sort of say your speakers have to emit a certain volume. There's all these protocols really of what you have to get certified. But the thing is, you don't actually have to be certified to do an Atmos mix. There are some labels that will only send you, work if you're certified. You're not certified as a person. It's just a room, which is weird.
Right.
So yeah. But so you can just start out with anything and just try. I already had 5 Genelec 8050s and a sub, and so I thought, how can I get that working? Now these aren't DSP speakers, so you need something. You need a piece of equipment like a bit of hardware that can obviously do 11 outputs at the same time, and you need something that can do some time delay difference, some calculations, and also EQ the speakers as well, and sort out do phase things with speakers. Now, Genelec actually do a DSP speaker that does this, but they're extortionately expensive if you want a cheaper system.
I love it, extortionally expensive.
Yeah. Well, I'm talking about the sort of people that want to try it out, because if you're a huge name mixer, whatever, and you can just afford to just go and blow a load of money, great. But if for a lot of people that want to try it out, me included, you know what I mean? I mean, hey, I'm mixing great records all the time, but I don't just have a load of money in my back pocket to buy speakers and all the stuff, Yeah. So I went with what I had, the non-DSP speakers, but with the MTRX, which I haven't bought, but plan to get as my next thing, just to make it easier. That helps with all the calculations as far as the phase, the time, a monitor controller and everything. So that way, I'm using my current existing setup with and sort of by getting a few extra things, I can then make that work. But some people, have, like Chris Sheldon, for example, I keep speaking about him. It's because I've been to his room where he's just recently set up to Now he has the Genelec speakers, but just the smaller ones. So you don't have to even have huge speakers. He's only got a smaller room, and it works great. It sounds amazing in there. So you really just have to pick and choose. You need something to do the calculations, the EQ curves, really.
Yeah, well, I know a couple of people that are setting up and, despite having rooms that are unusual shapes and stuff and, choosing smaller speakers and stuff, and they're getting it to work. So I think it's exciting. I'm looking forward to doing the headphone thing and trying that out myself. And then I just put in my new stereo speakers. So I don't know if I'm ready to put in, how many more? I would have to put in 9 more speakers.
Yeah. So what have you just got then? You're very excited about these new speakers in the new room. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So the Rockstars have certainly heard me talk about it, but I'm working with Carl Tatz, who designed my control room treatment. Cool. So that now it's got what he calls the acoustic lens treatment on the walls, where there's mirrors and columns, and it feels like more spacious in there, which is really exciting. I don't know if we're supposed to do something sideways with those mirrors on the walls, but I think that was back in the 70s, not in 2022 in the studio. But it sounds killer. And then there's treatment on the ceiling and the bass traps. And then he put in the HD 1000 Phantom Focus reference series monitors that are his design, and a pair of subwoofers in the corners. Nice. And then it all gets laser aligned, and they shoot it and do the final processing. There's sort of a rack of digital processing that it goes through on its way to the speakers, but it just sounds so good. Like at first I was a little worried about going through some more processing to the speakers. And I thought it's not going to sound right, but I'd heard what he did in another studio, and I just knew it sounded amazing. Though I will tell you the one thing that struck me at the end, as I was worried, I thought, am I adding latency? Like, what if I cut a guitar or a bass in the studio? And that turned out to be nothing to worry about it at all. It was, cool. There's nothing. I don't feel, it sounds so awesome to play guitar and bass right in the control room.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, amazing. Amazing.
Yeah. So that's a lot of fun. Actually, it reminds me when you were talking about the Atmos thing and having the speakers all around, and, I thought it's funny because one of the things that's fun to do in a control room sometimes is cut a vocal. And sometimes that involves having a kind of a hot condenser mic going. And so you have to be very careful, or we have to be very careful. Like, don't let the speakers be on if you're going to go into record. Yeah. Because that's how I've taken out a pair of NS10s in the past. And
me too.
If you got 11.1 speakers in or 11 speakers rather in there, you got to be extra careful that you don't go into record.
Yeah.
So future interns of Clint's, don't have the speakers up if you put the mic in record.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, I've done exactly that, taken out quite a few pairs of NS10s. Yeah.
Well, let's see. What else is exciting about getting it installed? How about just simple mechanical stuff? Like, how do you mount the speakers to walls and ceilings and things like that? And also, like, what's the general size of the room that's going to be your control room that made you feel like this is a good size and shape to put this into?
I was a little bit restricted by the room that I currently have, but it's actually quite a large, I'm converting my double garage into the studio. So it's not going to be a recording studio as such. I'll do some vocal overdubs and things like that there, but a lot of what I do, 70% of what I do is mixing anyway. So
where are you going to park the limousine though?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. Yeah.
The Bentley.
Yeah. Well, I'm beachside now, so I just bike everywhere. I'm very eco now, so skateboard and bike, and that's why I need to sell the Bentley for all the speakers.
Awesome. Well, it was a much better purchase anyway.
My room is going to be about 5 to 6 meters long, about 4 wide, and it's about 3 meters high. So I'm talking in meters, which is probably weird for you, maybe. I'm not too sure. Are you feet?
Yeah, so that's about 15 feet by 12 feet by 9 feet or something like that.
Yeah, so there's actually there are specific criteria of what you have to have for Atmos. Now I've sort of been speaking to the guys at Dolby about it, and also kind of modeling my room shape. I know a friend of mine, another friend of mine, has a room who has quite a small room, and he was worried about the actual size of it and the ceiling heights. Could he get away with it? But when they came to certify his room, they were really, like I said earlier in this podcast, that they just want pro mixers to start mixing. So they were like, you know what? Yeah, it could be a bit, it's fine. Your ceiling's fine. Don't worry. We just get it set up, and you'll be fine. We'll certify you. We know you're going to do a good job. So, I'm pretty confident that my room will be able to be certified. And it's just, I think acoustically, just making sure that it has all the same elements that you'd normally want in any studio, that there's not too much, bad reflections and bass trapping and all these kind of things. So, yeah.
Well, so I think if your ceiling height is 9 feet, then that gives you a little bit of clearance because do you actually have a speaker right above your head where you have to think about that in certain spaces?
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be 4 speakers above my head, really. So depending on the size of the speaker, and there's ways around it. Like Andrew Sheps has got these wafer speakers, which are very thin and can go, quite flush on the roof, But I'm using the General X, so they are, the ones I'm using are bigger than I need for the room, but I just don't need to have them so loud. The great thing about having the bigger General X is you don't need so much bass management system, because you have to have quite a lot of low end for it to work, you see. So it's either get bigger speakers and then not so many subs, or you might need a lot of subs and smaller speakers. Does that make sense? But the speakers do take up quite a lot of space when you're in there. It does feel a little bit like in a smaller room. It does feel, a little bit, not claustrophobic, but it's like when you're used to having 2 speakers and then you've got 11 speakers pointing at you, it's overwhelming.
You can no longer turn away.
Exactly. Yeah. All these things are looking at me.
Yeah. Fascinating. Well, so some other interesting thoughts for me is, I no longer will it make sense potentially to get up and walk to a different part of the room to see how it sounds like. Although maybe that still makes sense. But, it seems like there's sort of a sweet spot that's really defined by that. I also wonder what it's going to be like for people mixing when there's somebody else, a producer or somebody else in the space too. I'm sure, I guess the bigger the room, the easier it is to, have it sound right for somebody who's not in the same mix position.
Yeah, I mean, when you're in an Atmos room listening to something, obviously it sounds killer when you're sitting right in that spot. It's quite an experience. Like if you can try and do it, it's really cool. But I've been in rooms where there's 4 or 5 people, and obviously there's one person in the spot, and I'm standing at the back wall, and you can still hear how cool it is, And when you think about it, when people have their sound bar at home or whatever they've got, listening to their Atmos on, they're not, they're walking around, they're doing things. People are watching, stuff on TV or whatever, and not everyone's sitting in that one position, and that's the cool thing about it, I think, with. You still get the experience. It's not, you don't have to be a purist to listen to it. It's still music. It's got to be fun, right? It's still got to be enjoyable. You don't have to be so serious sitting down and, assessing how amazing this sounds or not. It's just getting that feeling, that vibe of it being all around you and immersive.
Yeah, totally. Well, I also think about my car. Well, I got a Tesla and it's got a bunch of speakers in it. It's definitely the best stereo I've ever had in a car, but it has this feature, where it talks about audio settings. There's basically an immersive sound slider, and you can put it on auto or do, I think it might be processing the sound though. I don't know if they're planning to make them,
They are. They're already coming. They're already doing this already. So
really?
I don't know.
Cool.
Yeah, I don't know what models of cars or whatever, but some of these cars have got an insane amount of speakers already in them.
Yeah.
So you can make it immersive. So it's once again, it's another format that you can. It's an everyday format that you can listen to. I mean, I know everyone doesn't own a Bentley or a Tesla or whatever, but it's becoming more and more common.
Yeah.
As far as people sitting in a room with 11 speakers in their living room, there's not many people doing that. And I think that as mixers of Atmos, there's not a lot of people that actually hear the mixers in its full, capacity. But there are so many other formats that people are listening to. So it's just like mixing in stereo. You need to check your mixers on, ghetto blasters, boom boxes, all those things that you would do in stereo. You do the same thing. I check on a soundbar, an Atmos soundbar that I've got, and there's even these little, like really tiny speakers. A lot of people can afford those, so check your mixers on those too.
Awesome advice. Look, it might be hard to describe in a few words what gives records a legendary sound, but it would be pretty easy to describe in a few letters: API. For more than 50 years, API Audio has created large format consoles for world-class studios. Famous for co-founder Saul Walker's circuit designs and original 2520 op amp, the sound of API consoles is the sound of great music. API now brings that legendary sound to your home studio with The Box, a small format console featuring the famous API circuitry that is the perfect analog addition to your digital studio. The Box gives you 8 recording channels on the left with built-in mic pre's, high-pass filters, direct inputs, customizable 500 module slots, and 16 summing channels on the right. Or you can mix using all 24 channels, including aux sends, inserts, and silky smooth faders. API now offers a virtual console experience with a personalized online demo of the Box, 16082, or 2448 console. Sign up for your demo now at apiaudio.com. Atom Audio introduces the new A7V monitor for home and pro studios, the next generation of the incredibly popular A7X. The all-new A-series line of monitors delivers the same highly accurate, transparent sound and unique accelerated ribbon tweeter design that has made Atom Audio famous for over a decade, but now includes new innovations, such as the rotatable high-frequency propagation system waveguide, allowing the XART tweeter to disperse sound with controlled consistency, and DSP-based room correction and speaker voicings. Using the A-Control software or SonarWorks and Measurement Mic, you can now integrate advanced filters directly to the DSP onboard the speaker to help compensate for imperfect room acoustics without introducing annoying latency or requiring plugins. This allows you to tune your monitors for your room, your mix position, and your ears anytime you want to meet your ever-evolving studio needs. Get the extended 5-year warranty for monitors that will improve as your studio improves at atomaudio.com. Howdy, rock stars. It's Lidge, and we're back now for the jam session, the second half of the show with Clint Murphy. Clint, are you ready to jam, dude?
Yeah, I'm ready to jam.
So moving on from the new Atmos stuff that you got going on, one of the things you talked about in the last podcast, you were talking about your mix stereo bus template or things that you would use. You have a consistency in your records that is seems really reliable. And you talked about using, I think, the tone bender as part of that, which if I understand it correctly, that's one of the TG Chandler boxes that gives you a little bit of, low end boost and a little bit of high end boost if you want to sort of put a smiley face EQ on the mix bus. Is that a right way to think about it?
Yeah, it's the Chandler curve bender is what it's called, it's amazing. And you know what's quite funny is it's quite an expensive bit of kit, and like it's just doing a little bit of lows, a little bit of highs. Every now and then I might pull a bit of low mid out, or push some upper mids. But I've been without it for the last 3 months, and because I've sort of moved from the UK to New Zealand, and I couldn't bring everything over in the suitcase. But so I've been using the UAD plugin of that, which is actually amazing, by the way.
Cool.
If you haven't got if you haven't got the cash to fork out to get the real thing, it is very, very good, and it gives you a sort of sense of what it does. But I did some mixes with the real thing on, and then I needed to make some tweaks and some adjustments, and so I put the plugin on, and it was actually just last week that the unit arrived, and I thought, I'm just going to stick this back in to check to see that it's not, I'm not losing something. And man, what I gained by having the real thing was just there was just more punch. There was more punch. It was like there was more dynamics. Like all the kicks and snares weren't being squashed as much. I had more volume of the whole. I had more volume of the whole track. I had more transients. I had more excitement just by switching between the plugin and the real thing. So
Wow.
I was trying to explain to my wife it was a very good purchase. That's that
Yeah.
$10,000 was actually worth it.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I experience that from time to time when you sort of do the plugin version of something and then you try it again. Like for example, when I let my old MCI console go, I did a quick mix through it. And it wasn't a perfect apples to apples comparison, but it was close enough. I did a mix through the console and then I just did a mix in the box and tried to see if I could emulate some of what I was hearing coming through the console. And they were both cool, but the console just like did a cool thing. And it just reminded me of that. In fact, I was chatting with somebody yesterday about it in the studio. And the thought was like, sometimes with the analog gear, it's not about that what they always do is perfect. It's just that sometimes with analog gear, the imperfections of things don't bother me, Does that make sense? It's like something can squish a little bit and a plug-in version might emulate that same squish, but with the plug-in squish, I might struggle with it and feel like, something about it bugs me, but the analog version of it squishing, for example, might make me feel like, yeah, but that just sounds cool.
Yeah. I mean, that's totally it. And I think it's okay that they're not like exactly the same. They make you do different things. Like for example, I have my bus compression. No, not my bus compression. I do like a parallel on my drums. So one of the things I have on parallel is a TG limiter, which is the same Chandler company do this thing with, and it really just basically squashes the hell out of the drums. And when you mix that in with a dry signal of the drums, the unsquashed signal, it creates a really great energy. Now there is a plug-in version of this, and sometimes I'm without my analog bit of gear. And so I'll mix, I'll mix with the plugin, and it sounds great. And then when I switch to the analog, it gives it the same feeling and vibe, but it is different. It is different. But sometimes actually the plugin's better, and it's not that the plugin's better. It's just that it makes you do different things before it hits that compressor. So you might add more room mics on your drums because it's just the way that it's reacting differently. Does that make sense? Do you know?
Yeah, or like it holds together better sometimes in a plug-in world than it does in an analog world. It's like there's definitely the easiest way for me to describe it is when I do stay in the box, I feel like I have much more control and flexibility. Like I can stretch my wings a little more in different directions or whatever. I don't actually have wings, by the way. But in the analog world, I feel a little bit more, and not always, but sometimes I feel more like I'm like my sandbox is a little more confined.
Yeah. I mean, I think you can think of it like this. Say if you have a mix running and you don't have any mix EQ on, so there's no stereo EQ. When you mix, it will make you do the different things in that mix. It will make you put more. Say your mix EQ, you might have some top end boost. Okay, say you don't have that anymore. What you would do when you were mixing is you would end up putting more top end on individual instruments. So more top end on your kick, on your snare, more top end on the vocals, more top end, because you're compensating for not having that EQ. So then when you put the EQ on, you wouldn't just go and boost a lot of top end EQ. It's just that you're doing different things in the mix because you don't have that bit of gear. If you did have the EQ on to begin with, you wouldn't put so much top end on your kick and your snare and your vocal and all these things. So I guess that's what I'm saying. The difference between the analog plugins and the digital plugins is all these things just make you do different things along the way to get the same final result. And that's why some people love mixing in the box. Some people love mixing analog. Some people, you don't have to have all this gear to do these great mixes. It's just, if these tools help you, just do whatever's good for you,
That's awesome, man. Well, it's always fun to be encouraged that, there are a lot of great possibilities for mixing in the box because most of us don't have really expensive gear in the studio and we have more access to what's possible working in the computer. And it's exciting. I mean, I'll be honest.
And same, I used to be I'm analog all the way, because that's how I learned. I grew up and I was very much a snob. And when someone first said, why don't you mix on a laptop? I was sort of thinking, well, that's no fun. So, but really for me, I would have to say maybe, if I'm really honest, 50% of having a lot of the analog gear is just because it makes me excited. It's the same as having, I'm not really into cars that much, but some people like driving fancy cars.
Yes.
Some people like drinking really expensive coffee because it floats their boat, and I'm one of those people. But it's still, you can still get along on your day without having expensive coffee. Do you know what I mean? It's just if it makes you excited, just do whatever makes you excited, because that's the main thing. If you're mixing or working and you're enjoying yourself and loving it, it will actually come through in the music.
Yeah. So the Chandler limiter that you're talking about, is that the Zener limiter or is that a different one?
The one that I use is called the TG1, which is actually a stereo. It's the Zener has more control, basically attack, release, has a bit more, but it's the same elements and components in it.
Yeah. I have a plugin from Waves. It's the Waves Abbey Road TG mastering chain. And I was looking at that, wondering if that would be one that would be fun for me to, try out on the mix bus like you were talking about. It does have the EQ in it and the limiter, and it's got some other stuff like filter, and there's
some widener thing
it's got a widener effect on it too. So fun stuff. Sometimes it's a little overwhelming when you mess with this stuff at first. So I think it's good to kind of break it down and sort of understand each component just a little bit. Maybe talk about the EQ. What are some common, either maybe not exact settings, but approaches? Are there certain frequencies that you find to be useful that you might use often on the EQ, or ways to think about how we want to integrate some? Let's just say we want to test this out on a mix next time. When do we put this EQ on the stereo bus? At the beginning before we even start mixing?
Yeah, I mean, I put it on to begin with. So I have a boost of 10 kilohertz of 2 dB. And I also have a 1 dB boost at 70 hertz. So a little bit of a smiley curve sort of thing going on. Now, with this particular EQ, even though it's boosting at 10K, it actually starts, it's like a pool tick. It starts really a lot further down, like 2, 3, and it's quite gradual. So that's just the style of EQ it is. Now, kind of just what I said 5 minutes ago is when you start with it on, it means that some of those elements you're not going to need to push as much. So, for example, people often put a bit of, high frequency in the vocal. So you're going to need to put probably less high frequency in the vocal because you've got some of that happening on your mix bus already. So that's what I just felt what I was doing all the time was putting, a little bit of 10K on everything and a little bit of 70 hertz on, kicks, basses, all these things. And so by starting off with that to begin with, that's something I learned, is that if I start with that amount to begin with, it means I'm not having to do so much more work within the actual individual elements of the mix.
Yeah, that's smart. I mean, I remember years ago, back in 2000 or something like that, when I was working with Jason Lenning, who's been on the podcast. Shout out to you, Jason, if you're listening. But he was talking about how mixing in Pro Tools and digitally, which was, still a very new thing that was sort of groundbreaking to do at that point still. that he'd say, oh, you know how you always have to put an EQ on because it needs a little bit of the highs and lows. And I remember thinking back then, I was like, no, I didn't know that. I've never done that.
I never used to do it as well. I used to think it was cheating, like why would you do that when you can just do it all in the mix? But so I cut you off there, but
no, that's all right. It's just that whole idea, but it's cool because another benefit to putting an EQ on the mix bus is it lends more phase cohesion between the different elements because you're not shifting phase on the individual instruments as much by EQing. And I don't know if that always applies to individual instruments or mostly to multi-mic'd instruments like drums. But I mean, like for example, Steve Albini talked about that on the show. He talked about trying to record drums where there's minimal EQ and processing going on because every time you do that, you're affecting the phase of those microphones. And, when he records drums, they sound very clear and focused. I guess that's a way to say it,
Yeah.
So we were talking about that. Well, that's cool. So then what about the, when you were talking about the limiter? Oh, when then you said sometimes you'll sort of scoop out a little bit of mids if it sounds like it could use it.
Yeah. So like I start with those sort of settings, and what's quite cool. I mean, I used to do this like going back, when I was just learning, and you take your mix and you go and listen to it in the car, and you get the tone control and you boost lots of low end and to make it sound big in the low end. And so I kind of started doing this a little bit. So when my mix is essentially done and I think this sounds great, what I actually do is I go over to the EQ and I think, am I lacking something? And then I just try it. So you can basically like boost loads of, say I'm boosting 70 hertz by 1 dB. I could, then I push it like 5 or 6 dB and just see what happens and then go, oh, okay. So when I do that, the kick drum low end is getting really loud, but the bass guitar is not. So I might want to put a bit more bass in my bass guitar. So then I'll put my EQ back to where it was, the 1 dB boost, and go over and to my actual individual bass, and then maybe try boosting some low end in the bass. Or I might do it with the mids and just try pushing some mids and go, what happens if I do that? And then I might go, oh, wow, those distorted guitars sound really cool, but everything else sounds too much. Why don't I go back now and just put a little bit of extra mids in my guitar? So it's quite a good way to just play around with the overall EQ to see what is better or worse by just messing around with it. And sometimes I might go, you know what, just maybe a half dB boost in the mid range is great. So I'll keep that on.
Yeah, that's cool. I like that idea. So it's basically like a frequency exploration across the whole mix.
Yeah, that's
where
it.
you find out, you boost it and you discover, oh, this instrument sounds good with that, but not the other one. So then it kind of clues you to go to that instrument and do it.
Yeah, I've actually got another little tip. Actually, speaking of this,
yeah, please, love them.
And this will help a lot of people because I think one of the hardest issues is getting that low end right. Because modern records, they have a lot of low end, and for people that are in spaces that are maybe a bedroom or even just headphones or aren't mixing in an environment where they've got a really well controlled room, what I have a plugin. You don't even need a plugin to do this, but if you just shelve or cut everything, put a low pass filter at say 60 hertz, and so you're cutting all the top end, and then you can just focus on that low end, and you can see what's happening down there without having to turn it up really loud and ruining your ears. Do you know what I mean? So you can just see, okay, what's rumbling? Is there some rumbling going on? Where is that coming from? And you can actually, within your mix, you can mute things or push up elements of the mix and see what's going on in that frequency band. And that will help you get like a better, more controlled low end where, will really help the mix. There might be some weird low end elements that are actually killing all the headroom in your mix or killing that mix bus compressor. So that's quite a cool little trick to do that.
Now you might put that after all your mix bus stuff though. Like you want to put it after the compressor and everything. So you're still hearing how it affects the whole compression.
Exactly. It's the last thing in your chain, and it's just like a little, like on your monitoring path or something like that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So I use a plugin called Reference, which is, you know that one?
That's exactly the one I'm using. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
nice. Yeah. So that is that comes from Mastering the Mix, right? I think so.
Yeah.
Make sure I get that right. And it's a cool plugin, Rockstars, because you can reference to Tom over at Mastering the Mix, if I'm saying all this right. Designed some very cool plugins, and it lets you load in reference tracks.
Yeah. So you can check,
compare.
Yeah, and you can compare the low end of your mix compared to the low end of someone else's mix with the same filter on, or the mid range, or whatever you like.
Yeah, that's very cool. It also does features like it sort of compares your compression, whether you're more or less compressed. I'd never really found I could figure out that part, but I think the simple act of, sometimes our plugins promise to do things that we're like, I don't think I'm as advanced as you. So
I leave the overall level thing to the mastering engineer, to Ryan Smith, our mutual friend. I'm like, you know what? I just make it sound as good as I can, and then he can deal with it. And one day he might come back saying it's too hot or something. But I mix with the limiter on, like a fab filter. What is it? The L2. Just to get a general feeling of what it might be like after mastering. And then when it goes to mastering, I take that off and then send him the unlimited mix. And also I'll send him the limited one, so he knows that what I've been listening to and what everyone else, the label, the band, everyone else has been listening to as well.
Yeah, that's basically what I do too. I think that for me, I need to remember to turn the limiter on and off more while I'm mixing, though.
Yeah,
and
okay.
I tend to go check it because in my experience, I can overcook certain things in the mix and not pick up on it because of the limiter. And it's like that balancing act where it's like, well, if it's going to end up hitting kind of a limiter or something in mastering, I want to make the right moves going into it. But on the other hand, I also feel like if I can just get my mix to sound right before the limiter, then that might be the better move too.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the reason why I have the limiter on a lot of the time is because I felt, my earlier days, when I would send something to mastering and it came back, and mainly my kicks and snares were quiet all of a sudden, because that's the main thing that mastering really cuts back on dynamics, isn't it? On some of those things, depending on how hard they push the limiting. But I just found it was a nice way to, especially with a lot of rock music or hip hop and stuff like that, where you got loud, drums. You want to make sure that once it comes back from mastering, that you still got that punch, really.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. So Craig Alvin, another guest on the show, he was talking about mixing into a limiter, and I've been practicing that, where it's like the kicks and the snares are showing up on the limiter while I'm mixing, and it does do something exciting. It's so funny, man. The whole experience of going and listening in the car, and a mix that's quieter and then turning the speakers up in the car. How does that sound versus the mix that's got more, that's like slamming the limiter, and then you go out and listen in the car. I think I was just playing two versions for my intern the other day, and in my head I had over pushed. This was just a song sketch I did, and I did a quick balance of it, but I had overcooked it into the limiter, and then I had gone and backed off and done a more appropriate one. But when they played back to back in the car, he just immediately thought the overcooked one was better sounding. And I was like, well, he's probably right.
Yeah. I know it's a hard one. I think the limiter it's like a safety net for us, isn't it? Like, it's an easy way to make stuff sound great, but you really need to deal with those issues beforehand. And that's the thing with this whole Atmos thing. There's no overall limiting. So I need to it's you've got to look at ways. Yeah, what do you do? But you just embrace it. You embrace the no limiting. That's the whole idea of it, right?
So you can't put a limiter on each send to a speaker or something like that, or?
Well, that's not how it works,
not really
because
how it works.
Because even though you've got a speaker set up, what you're doing is you're mixing what is 128 objects. So you'd need to have 128 limiters.
Let's do it. Come on, man. I got the new Mac Mini M1. I could do it.
I know. Yeah. But then because I'm mixing with the analog outboard chain, that's my battle, is I need to, all of a sudden that mix bus processing that I have that doesn't equate for anything. Do you know what I mean? So that's why it's kind of scary as well as exciting at the same time for me.
Yeah. OWC now brings you the Mini Stack STX, the world's first Thunderbolt 4 certified storage and hub expander, perfectly sized to stack with the Mac Mini and the ideal storage and connectivity companion for Thunderbolt or USB-equipped computers and devices. With a universal SATA HDD SSD bay and NVMe M.2 PCIe SSD slot, you can expand your Mini's storage capacity to gigantic proportions. 3 Thunderbolt USB-C ports enable you to connect to millions of Thunderbolt, USB, and future USB 4 drives, displays, AV mixers, cameras, and tablets, as well as desktop accessories like a keyboard, card reader, or mouse. I'm using the Mini Stack STX paired with my Mac Mini M1 to house my dedicated audio SSD and sample libraries, and it works great in my studio. Find the new Mini Stack STX and all your storage needs at macsales.com/rockstars. Have you ever wished you could remove the click track bleed from a singer's vocal mic, the sound of shuffling feet from a full choir, or clicking noises from the valves of an otherwise brilliant trumpet solo? These are just some of the incredible things I have been able to clean up, edit, or remove from a recording using the magic of iZotope RX. Great for mixing with a collection of plugins for your DAW to manage plosives, clicks, S's, noise, buzz, reverb, breaths, and even guitar fret squeaks, with the set it and forget it simplicity that lets you focus on your creativity in this studio while you let iZotope handle the audio challenges. You can even adjust your vocal, bass, and drum levels inside of a finished stereo mix using the wizardry of rebalance. RX is truly magical. Try out the subscription option with an extended 30-day free trial at iZotope.com/rockstars or use the coupon code ROCK10 to get 10% off any individual plugin purchase. All right, well, so mixing into your EQ, I noticed that, like, for example, I'm looking at a couple of different variations. The UAD version of it has that 70 hertz frequency and it's got the 10K, whereas, the Waves one, I think, has 64 hertz you can choose, or and 11K. So I don't know why we got to have different frequencies.
Different ones. Yeah.
But I wonder, like, how crucial do you think that stuff is? Do you think that those matter at all? Or do you think that it's more like a question of just trusting our ear and finding what curves, what selections are going to sound best with the tools we got?
Well, yeah, I think the latter, like if the frequency is slightly different, it doesn't really matter. You have to be boosting or cutting that frequency for a reason, don't just do it because I say do it. But like if you're boosting at 80 hertz instead of 70 hertz, it might mean that in the mix, you might be cutting out a little bit of 80 or below because you're boosting too much in that on your overall mix bus. But I will say the Waves, in my personal opinion, the Waves TG stuff doesn't actually sound as true to form as what the originals were.
Right, okay.
Especially the limiting, like the limiters and the Xena and stuff. Because the reason why I'm really into these limiters is because I cut my teeth on I talked about this in the last episode, but it was a 1974 EMI Neve, and they had these TG limiters and a Xena limiter in the console.
Those are pretty good.
Yeah, so that's where I got hooked, you know what I mean? And so I've been very particular about trying to recreate that sound in a modern environment. And as far as plugins go, the UAD ones are really the closest things, especially the limiters. Yeah.
Well, they definitely make excellent plugins.
And I think that with the Waves one, you get the feeling, but like of the limiting, but it's almost like it grabs like things like the drums too much and sounds a bit like, I don't know, a bit grabby and not like pumpy and breathy, like, because that's what the original ones are like. They're really, really pumpy and really like, whereas the Waves one seems to sort of grab and hold it, and maybe make it a bit thick sounding.
Interesting. All right. Well, it'd be an interesting comparison, Rockstars. If you got both, put them on the stereo bus and see
Yeah.
what they sound like.
You'll know straight away. Yeah,
Get the
you might
demos of stuff if you're going to do a shootout. That's one lesson that I remember. We all need to learn, Rockstars, is when you want to check something out, go get the demo of it and try it out. Don't have 50 million demos in your plugin folder though, because that's going to drive you nuts later. You're going to want to get rid of the ones you're not using. But don't make the mistake I did where if they, when you go somewhere, you like fire up all the demos of everything all at once because you won't have enough bandwidth to actually experience it. So like be very selective. Say, okay, today I'm going to, demo this particular thing and make sure you're only installing it when you're going to use it. So you get enough time to try it out. I remember doing that with the Wave stuff once. I was like, oh, demo them all. It sounds great. And, then 14 days later, I was like, oh, yeah, I forgot to go try those things.
Yeah, that's it. And I also, I think I've always recommended for people to just get one or two plugins and really learn those like inside out. Think of it like when people used to mix on an SSL console. So that's all they had for EQ and compression and stuff. They had the SSL channel strip, and they use that on every single instrument. So why not? Why can't you do that in the box? You don't need to have every single console emulation, every single EQ, Don't waste your time fiddling around with plugins when it's not the plugin that's going to make your mix better. It's the decisions you make about whatever EQ you're using. So I think don't get trapped into you need to have everything. You can do great mixes with just, a few plugins.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. When Craig Parker Adams was on the show, we were talking about that too, that he really is just a fan of the built-in Digidesign EQ, the stock one, and uses that for a lot of his mixing. And it's just that reminder that, it's the decisions we're making, and we're capable of making way more decisions with the stock tools and having an effect on what we do by all those, millions of decisions we could make with levels and EQs and everything compared to, having the absolute perfect whatever to work with.
Yeah. Something that I've just recently got, and it's transformed my mixing a little bit, is it's an SSL product, and it's called SSL UC-1. And you can
you're my favorite. You're my favorite. I got one too. Let's talk about that for the rest of the podcast.
Cool. You got one of these then, have you?
Yeah. And not only that, but Phil Wagner from SSL was just over at my studio checking it out. So that was kind of fun to chat with him and have it right there. But yeah, tell us about it. What is the UC-1? What does it do? Why do you love it? Have you had much of a chance to use it yet?
Yeah, I mean, I'm using it all the time. Now, essentially what it is it's let's say it's just a controller. I mean, it's a controller that controls the plugins, okay, the SSL plugins. So for me, I used to mix on, analog SSL consoles. So for me, having those knobs and things, like the EQ curves and everything in front of me was a big part of my life. Now, so I've been using their plugins for a long time anyway, and I think they're great. I do think that there are some other companies that make some better sounding ones for various different, applications. Mm-hmm. So, but the thing about the UC-1 is it takes that out of the box thing, and by having the controller in front of you, essentially what I was doing was I started looking away from the screen, and I would be able to control and EQ, mainly EQ and, compress individual instruments. And I just found I was using my ears so much more. And because you can get two fingers on things. So for example, you could go, okay, my vocal needs a bit of top end. So you can basically boost the top end. And with the other hand, go, move the EQ around to find the exact frequency rather than just using a mouse and moving, one knob at a time. So, and then I just started loading this plugin on, sorry, I just whacked the mic. I'm getting really excited about it. So I'm like, I just started using this plugin on every single channel just because it was easier to, because I do, like I said, I think there are some other plugins that might sound better on other instruments, but for the ease of use of me going, okay, great, I want to just quickly work. So, okay, I'm EQing the guitar, and then I'm pushing the guitar. I'm going, oh, now something's happening with my bass, so I can go over to my bass, and I can essentially just work in this flow where I'm sort of leaning over the console a little bit and not looking up at the screen and looking at the speakers, and it just, for me, just felt like really quick. And when I started looking at some of my EQ curves and what I was doing, I was like, whoa, those are actually quite different to what I would normally do with a plugin, because I'm using my ears more and I'm not using my eyes,
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you on that. And that's what I loved about mixing. The place where I got to mix like that the most in my experience was doing my Bonnaroo studio, because it was always a live mix through a console. It was a real-time mix. I was just in headphones and I had to make decisions and make things happen right then and there. And I loved the immediacy of mixing that way. And I kind of, while I'm honestly excited about what's possible in the computer, I also became more and more acutely aware of how much it sucks to try and mix with the mouse. And I always think of, and the analogy for me is like, imagine trying to play a guitar and all you have is the tip of a pencil to do everything you need to do to make a guitar sound like a guitar,
Yeah.
It's like, it doesn't quite work that well. But the UC-1 gives me the closest thing I've had so far in my studio to feeling like that. Now, I mean, I mixed on a D control once, where it was like the big desk. And I'm sure if I was doing that regularly, I'd probably love that. I mean, what is it? The Avid S6 kind of sort of does that in a big elaborate console. But that costs more than my car. So
yeah, but the thing is, I think with the S6, it doesn't feel like that console we know. Right. You have to buy into the whole SSL thing, as far as if you know SSL really well and you mix on SSL, this product is perfect for you. Yeah. Or if you want to solely mix on SSL, because it looks and feels like an SSL in front of you.
Yeah.
And it means that you're kind of limited to just using that one or two plugins from that company. But that, like I said, that doesn't matter. You can use it. Yeah, for now. But yeah, I mean, actually, I don't know if this is, because I sort of helped develop some of these.
But don't go get us all in trouble.
I'm not going to get you in trouble, but there are some great things on the horizon for this. At the moment, they have updated the software for it, the actual plugin, and it sounds loads better than the previous version. But there are things where they're looking to have different console emulations, possibly. This is just talks about what could happen. So you could have, because at the moment, how you have the G console, the E console, the K, the J. There's different. So they're looking to have different versions of this available as a plugin. But maybe more specifically, we're hoping that there might be, like, for example, a CLA version, or maybe there might be a Clint Murphy SSL. Like people who own these famous consoles can maybe have emulations, of them. So it means that even though you've only got this one controller, eventually in the future, there's the possibility of having different EQ curves or whatever, different versions of this plugin.
Yeah. So what I'm loving about it right now, and I do have the Avid S1. I actually got two of those and I have them on either side. Now, SSL makes the UF8, which is their 8-fader controller. And I just happen to have already had the S1s, and then I got the UC-1 for controlling the SSL channel strip right in the middle. So for all I know, the UF8 would have been a great experience using that. But the S1 gives me 8 faders over to the left, 8 faders to the right. And what I'm doing now is I've got an iPad over on my right, and I can take maybe you feel this way too, but some of this stuff, it gets so, well, it's, how do you say it? It's like we're trying to simplify our mix process, but you have to sort of get a little bit complex to arrive at simplicity, It's like, because you have to go through the process of setting this stuff up, trying out different workflows until you arrive at, okay, this makes it simple for me, but you've done the preparation to get there. And so right now I'm trying out where I'm using folder tracks in Pro Tools. So the drums will have a folder track, bass has got its own guitars, keys, vocals. And over on the iPad, I could just click one of those folder tracks and then it throws all the faders right in front of me across the S1.
No, that's cool. I like that idea.
Yeah. And then I can touch a fader and that brings attention to that track, which maybe depending on which insert slot you put the SSL channel strip 2 on, it automatically pops up. There are times where you kind of break that by having some other plugins in, or maybe you put it over on the right, plug-in slot 6 instead of 1 or something, but whatever, small detail. But for the most part, what's cool is I just reach over and touch the fader that I want to work with, and it's already switched without even me having to look at it or think about it. It's switched the SSL plugin up on the screen, and that's the one that's being represented by the controller, so that I just grab knobs and go. Yeah. And the UC-1 also has that little window in it where it tells you which track you're on. So kind of at a glance, you can confirm you know you're on the right one. So it's really fast like that. It's awesome.
Yeah, I mean it's great. I think there's things that could be better with it. Like anything, it's personal, but it's actually really quite a cost-effective thing. Like it's not actually that expensive. And as far as workflow, I think it really helps. I don't have the faders. What's that called? You've got that, don't you?
The UF8 I think that's the SSL fader pack, and the Avid S1 is Avid's version of an 8-channel fader pack.
So I've thought about getting one of these too, but actually I've sort of, well, not been put off, but I find I can use the mouse for a fader and then use the EQ, the UC-1 in front of me, or actually there's like a gain control. It would have been nice if it had a fader on it.
Yeah, just a single fader right on the bottom.
Yeah,
right?
But they couldn't do that for various reasons. It got quite complicated. But there is an input and output gain like on any plugin anyway. So what I find is, because obviously as you're boosting a frequency, things get louder. Yeah. Okay, so it sounds better. You're like, oh, wow, that's better. But don't be fooled, because it might be, you need to ask yourself with any instrument, what does it need? Does it need presence, or just does it need to be turned up? So what I find is I can push the EQ curve, like say push the presence, but then I can bring the output with the knob just down, just to compensate. And that way I can sort of, go, okay, is that better, or is it just, so it's not an actual fader, but it's, at least I can do that with two hands. You know what I mean? Like if I was normally touching a fader and an EQ at the same time.
Yeah, I totally do the same thing. And it's really handy to have the input and output gains right there, so you can kind of quickly adjust the gain structure of going through the SSL thing. And a lot of times, I'm sitting there boosting stuff and or boosting the compression on the SSL to just kind of excite the track or bring it forward a little bit in the mix. And that boosts up the gain. And so you're starting to clip the output of the plugin, and to see that right in front of you and instantly just turn down the output and know that you're in the ballpark. And then for me, with having the fader over there, that's where the nice balancing is. I can have one hand messing with the, compression and the other hand on the fader and look for that sweet spot. But it's just so much more fun to mix that way. And, while we're giving a huge shout out to SSL and the UC-1, the real message is that we're entering this world of dedicated controllers for mixing in the box. Granted, dedicated controllers have been around for a long time. The big, I guess it's the D command, right? The huge Pro Tools one, Digidesign one, but that was $100,000 mouse. So that wasn't accessible to everybody. And the fact that we can now all, with our home studios and stuff, start integrating and, discovering which of these controller tools we prefer. I mean, like plugins, it's like, you could probably get any one of them and you'll figure out your mix flow for it. So you don't have to worry about like, oh my God, I got the wrong one or something. You might like a feature of one over another, but ultimately I think just having that touchability, having the faders move, being able to like hit a solo button, hit a cut button instantly, how often do you take a fader and you just jam it to the top? Like, okay, that's the right track,
Yeah, that's it. You can't really do that with just a mouse, can you? Like so quickly, you can just, that's the way I work all the time. I just push things fast and quick, whether it be EQ, because you think, what is that? And then boom, turn the vocal up, go, oh, okay, so that's what that is. Or, when you listen to your mix and you think, are my drums exciting? I don't think they are. What can I do? And then you just basically hit Option and then click on the fader and then just pushes it right up to 0. So, it might be like, I might do that across various things of the drum. So go room, boom. No, it's not that one. What is it? Squash mic. That's the sound that I want. And then so you can just bring it down. But just by doing it quickly, there's just a little, I don't know, random top tip.
No, that's great. And then, the opposite of that I find is super useful. And
cutting and stuff, right?
Yeah, because sometimes we just need to discover like what's sucking about my mix. Like, what is it that's bugging me about this thing? And having those mute buttons where you quickly mute stuff.
Yeah.
And, I'll listen to the drums. I'm like, what's not exciting about this? What does this not sound right? And then I'll just mute a bunch of mics at once so that all I'm left with is a kick and snare. And then I'm like, oh, that's where they are. And that's what they sound like.
Yeah.
So it's great having that flexibility and speed.
You know what it is for me? It's reminded me, it's always like, where's all that hi-hat coming from?
Exactly.
Where is that hi? And you start musing overheads, rooms, everything. Where is that hi-hat? All I've got going is kick and snare. And it's like, oh, okay, that hi-hat is like the snare killer. It's always coming through that snare track, man. That's my life battle. I don't know if that's your life battle, but.
Yeah. I don't know what, I'm trying to remember. I feel like there were some interesting proposals for solutions on that kind of stuff. So it was, I can't even remember. Like triggering drums. I don't remember if you talked about how useful you find it to use drum triggers in your mixes. Did we talk about that last time? Is that an important thing for you, or do you try and stay away from that stuff?
Yeah, I try and stay away to a point where I can, because I think you can only get it to a point, your drums to a point where you can get as good without those triggers and stuff. So I don't just jump on the trigger straight away. I just go, okay, how can I make this as good sounding as possible? It all depends on the music, of course, but say it's, like your generic rock music. Generic rock music these days generally has pretty punchy kicks and snares and stuff. So I try and get as punchy as I can without those triggers. And then I think, okay, now I'm going to go for the triggers. But what type of triggers? What should I use? In the instance where you love your own snare sound, it sounds fantastic, but it just has like too much hi-hat coming through. Obviously you could gate that snare, but the problem is whenever the snare is open, it will bring that hi-hat up for that moment. So I might use a sample of my own snare and just layer that under, so it's exactly the same, and it's almost like a mix knob. Then you've got basically, even if it's just the one velocity that you've got, like the hard velocity that you can just sort of put in.
Hey, it just makes it sound like a consistent drummer.
Yeah, and it's consistent. And that means you can bring, the actual live one down a little bit, and it's still the same sound, So that's a way of doing that. But I think a lot of people just go, okay, drums, let's just throw triggers on. Actually, what's something that's I'm getting a little bit annoyed at the moment. And,
tell us.
Is I'm getting a lot of records to mix now that don't have live drums. A lot of people, especially it's almost like it's the norm now for like heavy metal and a lot of rock artists.
That's just because everybody was stuck at home for 2 years.
Yeah, maybe it is, but it's like, I don't know. I'm discovering new ways now to have to try and make drums sound good, like to try and make them sound real.
Yeah.
It's funny, we've gone from making live drums sound really programmed with triggers, and now it's like getting programmed drums to sound live. How can we make them sound a bit shittier, let's say, a little bit more, with the flaws in it to make it sound natural. Yeah.
So you just finished an awesome mix and sent it off to the band, but the singer texts you with lyric changes, the drummer emails you wanting a different fill, and the bass player DMs you about a wrong note in the chorus. But which mix version were they talking about anyway? Don't you wish there was an easier way? Samply.app comes to the rescue as your ultimate mix assistant, streaming full resolution audio so your clients can easily listen and send notes from their mobile phone on the road or the computer computer back at the studio, all mix comments are time-stamped directly onto the correct mix version with no confusion, and you also get A/B listening capability with synchronized playback and level matching for easy mix comparison, all inside Samply. It's file sharing that was built specifically for music, and it all works inside your browser with no downloads required. Sign up now for your free account with 25 gigs of storage and unlimited projects, and use the coupon code RSR20 to get 20% off the first 3 months when you're ready to upgrade at samply.app. 50 years ago, William G. Dilley introduced the world to his revolutionary new dynamics processor, the Model 610 Complementer. A truly unique device, the Model 610 was not only the fastest, cleanest, and quietest of its type, but was also capable of providing completely separate peak limiting and compression functions. Today, Spectra 1964 introduces the Model C610 Complementer, described as the most versatile piece of audio gear you can buy. Great for adding control and power to everything from vocals, guitars, and bass to mixing and even mastering, the C610 gives you the same massive sound that rocked legendary studios like Stax, Ardent, Advision, A&M, and Record Plant. It even has enough gain to function as a mic preamp. I'm using the C610 on every record I make at the Toy Box Studio, and you should too. You'll love it. Go to spectra1964.com or call 801-797-0642. Well, so give us some tips on that, because there are definitely rock stars who are using, like Superior Drummer and these other, automatic drum Logic, the drum track, how brilliant is that thing? If you just want to sit down and write a song in your home studio. Yeah. So what are some tricks that you're discovering can help take that and make them sound a little bit more like real? Just fuck them up and make them sound worse or something?
Well, to some degree, yeah. I mean, I think a lot's to do with the compression or I think a lot of the cymbals sound so perfect. That's the issue. The cymbals in the rooms, because I think we're used to sort of hearing triggered kicks and snares a bit. So it's okay that they sound a little bit fake. Do you know what I mean? So it's all to do with the room elements. So often, like I might use Superior Drummer, for example, and with the Superior Drummer, you have the options of bringing out, separate room mics and everything like that. So I will, compress the rooms quite heavily, try and add a bit of distortion or funk to them or whatever. But I will also use this alongside with other plugins like Slate Trigger. So I might have a snare, for example, coming from Trigger, but it might not be the direct snare. It might be just the rooms. So, for example, I might have kick, snare, and toms and just use like the room elements of that from the Trigger, and then I might have them going to a bus and actually put some distortion on that or crush that up, or maybe because they're quite bright and sizzly, so you might roll off a lot of top end and then compress it, because that's kind of what a room mic would sound like. These room mics don't always sound
the Blackbird drums, which is like the perfect stereo, big giant room. I think sometimes the things that make it feel real to us are the indicators that we didn't have the fanciest studio in the world to record the drums in, or that the mic sounded a little, like sometimes what sounds real to us is microphones on drums that sound a little bit messed up and then got worked on to try and make them exciting.
Yeah, it makes it sound real, like a real kit then, right? Yeah. When something's a little bit out of control, but it's not intentional.
Right.
It was just like a part of where those mics were. Like one of the techniques I like to do when I record drums is, and I've spoken about it quite a lot, and you can see this technique online if you want to look on YouTube or whatever. I call it my floor mic technique, and it's essentially two microphones on cardioid pointing down at the floor about 3 foot in front of the drums. Now, this is not a great microphone technique. This is not, if you read in a book how to record drums, it would definitely not say do this. But for me, it picks up kind of a horrible, like, not horrible, but it's quite boomy sounding. The cymbals aren't very clear. It's all a bit, it's all a bit sort of, it's just thumpy and a bit horrible. When you like really compress that a lot with, say, something like the TG1, it gives it like a grit. And when you mix that into a drum kit, it makes it sound more real and live. So when I'm working with these sort of program drums, I'm trying to create sounds like that I can mix in somehow, like by using, the fake rooms to try and create these more grungy, horrible, shitty sounds,
Yeah, I love that. And I think part of it is we need to understand that the shitty miking sound, the way you just described it, needs to also be paired with the right kind of compression, and that ultimately becomes the cool sound, right? So sometimes we learn about a technique like a funky miking or even a room mic, and we might try it out at first and then be like, why doesn't that sound exciting to me? I don't like that sound. Not realizing that it needs to have that excitement added back in with the right kind of compression. I even remember like the first time I tried the Glyn Johns thing.
Yeah.
I didn't like it at all. I was like, oh, that's terrible sounding, until I started to explore, okay, it needs to have the right kind of, maybe just a little bit of the right compression on it and things like that. And the right kind of drumming underneath it.
Of course, it's always about that, isn't it? Yeah. But like the Glyn Johns thing, for example, you can get really cool, like modern sounds by using that technique with, if people don't know what it is, have a look. It's pretty classic, iconic, 3 microphones on a drum kit. But if you get that and then add like samples to that and crush it up, you can actually get like a really cool modern take on a Glyn Johns drum sound. You know what I mean? Like can be used in great like funk records or just even in a section within a rock song where you want the drums to break down into a bit more of a crazier sort of drum sound, but then you can still make it modern by having your other samples on top from Trigger or whatever it may be. I mean, it's funny. A lot of the work I'm doing when I'm doing songwriting, it's all done in Superior Drummer or whatever. And when it comes to recording, sometimes it's hard to beat that sound, especially like I often will use this, like it might be a verse part where the drums go to a crazy distorted thing. And I've just basically got some drum kit with some old like Brady snare and Ludwig massive 26 kick or something. Some of those things aren't really available to us in the studios we go to. So, like a thing like that, I'm okay to use, Superior Drummer or whatever it may be for sections of songs. I think that's a great tool,
Yeah. What are some, if you were to explain to somebody who didn't have those things, we know that there's Trigger, for example, is one of the tools we can use. Superior Drummer is another tool. What's the difference between those two if somebody's just being introduced to it?
Well, I mean, there's a few of them as well, isn't there? There's another one from this sample packs you can get. Nolly Get Good he's another guy who's doing them, you can use in Contact. But obviously, you can program your drums, and then they have you can bring out basically like kick in, out, snare top, snare bottom, hi-hat, like all the individual mics that you'd normally have. And you can adjust the levels and hits for each one of those. And then essentially you can then add compression and EQ to individual elements. So that's, if you want to break it all out like that, you can do that. Or you could just have it as a stereo instrument track as well if you want. So, but you can actually like blend. What I'm saying is you can blend the two different things together. So you could put Superior Drummer with the Nolly Get Good and also the whatever, like have 3 or 4 of them running at the same time, but just use like room elements of one, to add to the other sound. It kind of somehow gives you more tools to sort of make it sound a bit more real, I think.
Yeah. And then are you ever, you talked about using your own snare. Mm-hmm. So this would be the snare that was also the snare in the drum kit that you're mixing in that moment?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So you're sorry, you're talking about using live drums and
You don't put me on the spot, dude. I don't know what I'm talking about, but I'm just, as long as we're talking about the studio, I'm happy. No.
Well, actually, this is quite a good one too, a good topic, because there's actually a few clients I work with that they don't have, recording studios. They're doing it at home or whatever, and they're just setting up a drum kit in a corner of a room with no, nothing fancy, no good mics or whatever. But if you get that drum kit and then apply, say, Superior Drummer to it, you can actually create quite a cool sound. And it's because what we were just talking about, there's the essence of a live, horrible drum kit underneath this actual program kit. But you have to make sure that the MIDI triggers, like the samples, line up exactly with the live drum kit.
Yeah, don't be loose and sloppy, or else you've got two snares hitting a little bit spread apart.
Yeah,
or something.
Exactly. So my recommendation for this is, when they record, if you obviously need to go in individually and just line up all those MIDI things. So don't be sloppy with that. It has to be, otherwise all your phasing's out, everything's just wrong. The hard thing to do though is get the cymbals lined up, because cymbals are very hard to kind of see. You basically need to be able to see the transients in the waveform, don't you, to be able to line it up.
Now, when you say cymbals, which kind of cymbals are we talking? Are we talking about actually lining up hi-hats to go on top of the original hi-hat?
Yeah, it sounds like a big job. Yeah, so it depends on all the style of music, whatever it may be. But sometimes when people I've preferred to have the live kit going underneath and the samples running alongside it.
Yeah. Well, hi-hats also, Rockstars, when you zoom in and look, you start discovering those hi-hats do not line up with the kicks and the snares.
No, they don't. But you know what? Even if they don't a little bit, like if the MIDI and the cymbals don't line up, but you're just using a little bit of the room underneath, if they're close enough, there's not going to be phase issues, because, let's say there's not really phase issues because it's a different room.
Yeah, mostly the phase is the low frequencies. Like
the kick and the snare. And that, so definitely line those up. But if it's a roundabout, say someone's crash riding on a cymbal, going, playing your classic.
Yeah, we're in the outro, right?
Yeah, exactly. The cymbal's going. You can kind of put your cymbal hit underneath in a roundabout way, because it's a washy cymbal, right? No one's really going to hear the transient, most probably. So you can get away with that. I'm just talking about enhancing the drum sound that's already there. If they've got a drum kit that has no room mics on it, then you can add some of those room mics in from your Superior Drummer.
Oh yeah, interesting. So we're hearing the real mics, the real drums kind of up close, but we're hearing the trigger is giving us maybe the room sound that goes with it. Or you could do vice versa, where we're hearing the triggered sounds up close, but we're hearing, the live drums are more spaced sounds like the room mics and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, that's fascinating, because I actually I haven't done cymbal replacement. I haven't found myself doing that, but if this was a pop quiz and you're like, pop quiz, Lidge, can you do cymbal replacements for drums? I would have guessed no. So that's pretty cool to hear that we can actually make that work as well. I'm certainly aware of adding kicks and snares, and in my experience, kick is the first easiest one to get away with replacing or adding. We've had like Billy Decker on the show talk about just automatically replacing the kicks, because he's got a whole very fast mixing template workflow that he likes to do. And he just, without question, just mutes the original kick, replace it with the trigger. You got a steady kick. But, and then I think that when we explore this stuff, we try adding in a snare sample, and then we're pulling our hair out a little bit. We're like, oh, that's pretty cool. And then we're like, it's not cool. Why does it not sound real? And then we learn the things like, well, it's because you're adding a totally different kind of snare sound there,
Yeah. That's the harder one to do.
Yeah.
With the cymbals and stuff, it's I mean, you can do it, and it's not as accurate, but I mean, I'm talking about trying to fix up something, like, for example, a drum kit that's been recorded that only has left and right overheads and has no room. If you want to try and make your drum sound better, it's easy to do kick and snare samples, but then all of a sudden you've got these amazing kicks and snares and just terrible cymbals. So
Right.
if you can around about sort of place the cymbal hits in, you can enhance your drums. We're basically trying to polish a turd, aren't we? In a way, is what we're trying to do. With the drum kit, a badly recorded drum kit to try and make it sound epic.
Yeah. Do you want to record killer drums in your home studio? Rockstars of Drums will show you how to record, edit, and mix pro-sounding drums with examples from a Nashville session drummer in a Grammy-winning studio. Do you want to know how to master your own music at home? Rockstars of Mastering will show you how with plugins in your DAW so that your music will sound awesome when you finish your mixes. And if you're looking for a step-by-step solution for a pro-sounding mix that won't take years to learn, the Ultimate Mixing Masterclass with Craig Alvin will show you a proven method for creating Grammy-winning quality mixes that you can apply in your home studio right now. Or if you just need to learn the fundamentals of creating a great sounding mix, then register for my free course Mixmaster Bundle to get great mixes using simple free plugins. And get started now making your best record ever at recordingstudiorockstars.com/academy. Use the code ROCKSTAR at checkout to get 10% off any course for a limited time. Well, it's fun stuff to get into. I mean, I think we all know that the most fun is to just get it to sound killer when you record it if you can.
Oh, of course.
Sometimes we even just get close. We think we got it, but then a little later on, you're like, you know what? I still need that extra magic at the mix to get this thing to sound right. Yeah, recording drums is a lot of fun. I don't remember what we talked about as far as that goes last time. If you were going to tell the rock stars, hey, if you've got a choice, record with these mics so that when it goes to somebody who's mixing it, they will most likely have the stuff they want. Do you want to give any tips regarding that?
Yeah, I think it's always good to have on kick drum, have kick in and out. So, I mean, it doesn't really matter what you've got, really. I think if you've got a couple of mics, it always helps. So, I mean, I like a D112 or something like this on or a D6 or for a kick in and a U47 FET on the out. But I'm just going to say blanket across most instruments. So kick in and out, snare top and bottom, it's good to have. Please do stereo overheads, so left and right. Sometimes I get given two sets of overheads, so it might be a pair of Coles and a pair of condensers. Obviously, a pair of Coles is darker and more weighty and fat with the snare and the toms. They sound great, but cymbal-wise, you need quite a bit of EQ on the top end to make them nice and shiny. So sometimes I prefer, if it's more of a modern record, to have the condensers. So if you've got that option of doing two sets of overheads, you can just place them right next to each other. So they're just the same placement and you're avoiding too much phase problems. And
that condenser is going to go shoop and magnetically stick to the Coles.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I know, exactly. Or often what I do is with the Coles, I might have an A-B pair and then I do like an ORTF or an XY for the condensers. You just need to make sure that obviously with more microphones, you've got phase problems. So I would make sure that they're sort of spaced about the same height. But that's not essential. I mean, just make a decision and choose a set that you like when you record, but just please record stereo overheads. Yeah. So there's that. Some people like a mono overhead thing. I'm not too fussed about that. It's nice to have, but it doesn't always make it in the mix. It's good to have, even though it's extra mics, a hi-hat mic and a rides mic. Often they might not get used, but they might get used within a section of a song. So if it's a really intricate hi-hat part, you might want to bring up the hi-hats in your mix. So just anything, and it can be a 57. Do you know what I mean? On a hi-hat. And then the other big one, well, I think tom tops, of course, and try and use a microphone per tom. Don't try and use one mic for two toms. Yeah.
Don't have that many toms.
Yeah, or just, yeah, that's the thing. If you've only got two mics, just put two toms up, man. Honestly. Going back to that, that's another thing. But I'll quickly come back to that. But room mics, if you can just make sure you have one or two sets of stereo room mics, like a close and a far. I'm not hugely into mono room mics, but it's easy to make a mono room mic out of a stereo mic. And I know this is a proper Bob Clearmountain thing as well. Just, it's like my pet hate when people only send you one mono room mic. It's just like, what can you do with that, But I was going to say something about many toms and many cymbals. Some drummers don't have them. Some drummers love to have them, and that's fine. Some songs might need them. But if it's just per song, decide. Like if you're only hitting, two toms on one of the songs, just take all the other toms off for that one song. Because they just sit there rumbling away going, and every time you hit the kick, it's going to go,
Yeah.
Yeah, so just put towels on them or whatever. Decide when you're recording, what are you hitting and what are we not using? Take the cymbals off, like if you're not using a splash cymbal, take it off. Because all these things add reflections and make it harder to get microphones in the right place. So it's okay to in between songs, take things off and switch cymbals around and make a drum kit smaller, do you know?
Yeah, and with the cymbal idea too, like let's say you're doing a tom overdub part for the song, or maybe the song just has drums in it, put a blanket over all those cymbals too. Even those sitting there hanging out are ringing along with the sound of the drums.
Yeah. And also tom wise, you need to put a blanket over the toms on the top and the bottom as well. So you have to stuff a pillow because sometimes you don't want to take all the drums off. You know what I mean?
Right. Like most of the time. We don't even want to get out of the chair.
Yeah.
Come on. Get up and move about.
Exactly.
Now, what about sampling the kit that we just recorded and then using those samples as the triggers that help us mix later? Do you find that to be a useful process?
100%. Yeah. It seems like a real faff at the time having to do it, but I'm pretty much all the time using the kick sample and tom samples, not the snare, but in the past I thought, well, I can't be bothered recording the snare because I never use it. But then it's the times you don't record it that you need it. So yeah, always just record if you can the samples and send it to your mixer or if you're mixing yourself, because once you've got them, it only takes 5 minutes to do, and it can be quite helpful. I often, for rock music, replace all my kick drums with the sample of my own kick drum.
Nice. And then have you explored the, I guess it's the patch creator. I forgot what it's called, but from Slate for trigger.
TCI patch. I have, and but I don't use it. I don't know why. I probably should. It's probably a better way to do it, but it just takes, I think, more time for me.
Right.
You know what? One day I'm gonna sit down and do it and go, why have I not done that? Because I'm going in and replacing each tom hit with. I guess what I like is when you record a tom, say your tom 1, it's got a track, it's called tom 1, and then when I put the sample, I put it on a new playlist that is essentially in exactly the same spot, and it's on the same track that my original tom was, without having to create more auxiliary tracks and more tracks. Do you know what I mean? It just keeps my sessions simpler, and I like it like that. It's the same sound, so it can go on the same track, right?
It's the same sound. I put it on the same track, sure. I went through the trouble recently to create the most complex drum template I've ever had, where I've got like the trigger plug-in on aux track for the kick, one for the snare, one for the floor toms, and the tom. And like I could load my drums into that and have everything, with a couple of knob turns. I've got all the triggers going and I've got all the suppression going. And I put in all this time, and I don't want to disparage any technique, because we don't hear about techniques because they're bad ideas. Usually they're great. That's why we hear about them. But I went through all the trouble, and I did a mix of a project I'm working on, and then I was like, awesome, I did it, And then I went back and I listened to my previous quick mix where all I did was just boldly EQ and compress the drums. And
Yeah.
it blew my new mix out of the water. And I was like, all right, screw it. And I just scratched that. I'm going to go back, pick up where I left off. But it's just, it's just a reminder to me that there are all these really, really cool options to us, and they're all worth trying. But it doesn't mean that one is definitely going to be the right answer until you go down that road and try it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think we might have spoke about this last time, but the band Enter Shikari, who I mixed, this is how they did all their drums on their latest record. They actually hadn't written the drum parts yet, but they were in the studio. So they wanted to record, all the guitar riffs and everything. They knew what they were, but they didn't really know what some of the drum parts would be. So they sampled their entire drum kit, all the cymbals, everything, all the different snares for each song. And they had this massive library. They spent hours and hours and hours putting it together. And it kind of blew their minds because they were like, well, we can just use this drum sound now, and we can change the kicks and we can change the snares and change all the patterns, which was, really cool for them. But for me to mix, when I ended up with because they sent me the audio tracks, I had like I had 256 drum tracks at one point. And it was because, like a little ride cymbal that went ting, had the 16 tracks allocated with it. So I was just on like a big delete mission. At that point, I was
folder tracks.
Yeah, well, not even. It was before that. I was I only had native as well, so I couldn't even open the sessions. So I was just going, okay, without even hearing some of these things, I was like, okay, don't need that. Delete. And I told the producer like about 6 months ago, I was like, I'm really sorry, but I just had to make this work and delete stuff. He's like, it's fine.
Yeah, that's funny.
It sounded good anyway.
Awesome, dude. Well, man, this is a blast, dude. I guess we're coming up on the end here, but I love all this stuff we were talking about. Your Atmos setup. Just talking about mixing for binaural, getting into the controllers like the UC-1, and like really understanding how to dial in our workflow, and then all these great drum tips. Anything we didn't talk about that you really wanted to talk about before we wrap up?
Gosh, no, put me on the spot there. I'm not sure. Is there anything you wanted to ask me?
How do you surf? How do I stand up on the board? What's the trick?
I think it's like mixing, right? And recording. It's just practice. And then one day you just hooked, and you can all of a sudden go sideways down the wave. You know what I mean? It's like all of a sudden you can mix a snare. Woohoo!
Awesome, man. I love it. Well, let the rock stars know where can they go to check out your work, find out more about you. What if they're ready to send you the crappiest drums in the world and come out the other end, sound like a hit record?
Yeah, just all the usual. I mean, Facebook seems to be a good one for me. I post a lot of stuff on that, and you can hit me up on Messenger. So I'm just, Clint Murphy or Clint Murphy Productions. Just Google me, Clint Murphy, and you'll see things. Instagram. I have a website, which the website's quite cool, actually. It's not your classic. It doesn't work very well on an iPhone. You have to hold it. If you want to look at it properly, look at it on a computer. But it's the original 1974 EMI Neve that I cut my teeth on. I've sort of modeled the whole site on that with sticky tape and everything. And I need to do more updates to that, and even the discography and everything. But go check it out. And just my contact details are on there as well. Please, if you want to email me, that was really cool actually. From last time at the show, I got loads of people emailing me and saying, "Hey man, great. I heard your podcast on Lidge's show, and it was really inspirational." And I love that. It makes me feel like I'm helping people out. If anything, if people have any questions, just hit me up. Honestly, please, I'd love to hear from you.
That's awesome, dude. Well, it's a big pleasure to have you back on the show. Thank you so much for joining us. One of these days I'll make it down to New Zealand, and maybe I'll get enough time to figure out how to learn to stand up on a board and do some surfing.
Yeah, we can get you on a board. And to be honest, I have to come to Nashville. I really must see, of course, you, but Ryan Smith, we talked about at the start. Yeah. If anyone wants some amazing mastering, go see him. Sterling Sound, he's the man. Amazing at cutting vinyl as well. One of the best guys in the world at doing that. So, and there's actually a really cool, I've been using a plating plant down the road called Welcome to 1979.
Yeah, we just had Chris on the show, and we need to have Ryan back on the show too.
Oh, cool. Yeah, great. Well, so what's great about that is Ryan can cut it and he can actually hand deliver it down there and they can just plate that vinyl straight away and it just sounds amazing.
Now,
So
are you allowed to drive through the coffee place on your way across town, or is that like you don't just like be straight from point A to point B?
yeah, maybe because you might lose maybe 0.0001 dB of top end off
That's
your
what I was
records.
thinking. That's
Yeah.
exactly what I was worried about. Yeah. Thank you. All right, dude. Well, Rockstars, thanks so much for listening. And Clint, we'll see you around the studio, dude.
Thank you for having me, Lidge.
All right, man. Cheers.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. And if you want more free content from Recording Studio Rockstars, all you have to do is go to rsrockstars.com/email. Again, that's rsrockstars.com/email to enter your name and email, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, podcast updates, and even free gear giveaways for your studio. Just look for the link in the show notes below. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lidge Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our amazing sponsors who help make this episode possible: API, OWC, Spectra 1964, Samply, Atom Audio, and Isotope. Remember to use these coupon codes for special discounts. At isotope.com/rockstars, use the coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off any plugin purchase, or start your extended 30-day free trial subscription for access to many plugins. At samply.app, sign up for a free account with unlimited projects, and use the coupon code RSR20 to get 20% off the first 3 months when you're ready to upgrade to a pro account. At recordingstudiorockstars.com/academy, use the coupon ROCKSTAR for 10% off any course for a limited time. You will find links to all these awesome sponsors in our show notes. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio. They're going to help you make your best record ever. I would also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars, Vlad Weselchenko, Braden Stremming, and John Richardson, for additional podcast and video production. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.